Trevor Louden is going to be in the Louisville area Friday, March 19th, 7 to 8:30 p.m. at Evangel Christian School, 3728 Taylorsville Road in Louisville. And then he's going to be at Unfinished Church, Saturday, following day, March 20th, at 1421 East Elm Street in New Albany. And then on Sunday, March 24th, the third day, he's going to be at Lee's Lane Baptist Church, 3309 Lee's Lane in Louisville. Now, Trevor Louden is one of the top speakers in probably the world, and he's very good. And if you get a chance, you ought to go down there. So that's Friday, the 19th of March, Saturday, the 20th of March, and Sunday, the 21st of March. The phone number is 895-5025. If you didn't get all that information, 895-5025.
And it's also on our website, Frank Simon and American Family Association.
And the subject, he's going to be speaking on communism in America.
It's like what we're talking about, the infiltration of the Democrat Party, taking away destroying our First Amendment rights, our religious freedom of expression, everything that you've talked about.
It's their agenda. Yeah.
It's their agenda, and that's what this is.
Hi, this is Frank Simon. Welcome to the rest of the news. Our special guest today is Rick Howland and Cindy Marlow. We've got some really important things to talk with Rick about today. Rick, there are people that don't want us to have inalienable rights.
Their problem is they don't like the source of the inalienable rights,
which is
God. When you acknowledge that rights can be inalienable, it means when you come here, is that little bitty package from your mama? When you came here, what was wrapped up in your blanket, your swaddling clothes, were a little thing called inalienable rights. Just like you had your skin and bone and hair, and you also had inalienable rights. We have a mindset on foot in the land where inalienable rights get in their way. I remember President Obama said that what we have here is a list of negative rights. He said, I think what we really need as well are a list of positive rights, things I can do for you. That's a paraphrase of what he said. That was why he was running for office in 2007. But the problem is, anybody in my lifetime, I'm 73 years old, that wanted to do something for me, also at some point needed something from me. Right. Even my friend Dr. Simon, me and him been friends now for 34 years at least.
Long time.
I got to admit, Dr. Simon is a guy that'll go down a dark alley with you. If it's a thing to be done, it don't matter how rough or how dangerous, he'll go. So I got a lot of admiration for him. So for all I know, he was doing all that nice stuff for me. So I'd go down a dark alley with him.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just messing with you, but I'm making a point. When we love each other, when we help each other, God knows if we're doing it for the right reasons and it's in God's will, he knows that as we build relationship, we work with each other. We stand beside each other. And that's what he wants his children to do. But when you're dealing with people who have a different kind of agenda, and they don't want you to have inalienable rights, and they want the opportunity to make you dependent on them.
Or can control your thought and your mind.
Yeah, then they start wanting to tell you what to think and where to go.
I thought what you said was so beautiful. Wednesday at the meeting, we're trying to get the AFA chapter in the West End. And you said, what does the First Amendment say? And we were all saying, well, right to redress grievances. You said, what is the very first part of it? And it is that Congress shall make no law to establish a religion. You said, why? Then we had to answer our brain. That's why. We had the freedom to think. And what's the second part you said? Heart. And I thought that was beautiful. They're not supposed to be able to tell us how to think.
That's how I know the First Amendment was written ex cathedra. These guys that were sitting there were brilliant guys, the founding fathers, were brilliant men. And many of them were very faithful men. But none of them was that smart. That's why I believe it's inspired. Because the very first right enumerated in the Bill of Rights is not any of the things we argue and fight about. Second Amendment, Bill of Speech, the right to protest, and all of those things. Privacy, and all of these things we argue and fight about. The very first thing at the top of the list was God's right. Not our right.
He gave to us.
But God's right to have territory that only belongs to him. And he articulated by saying, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, and religion lives in the heart and in the mind. And at that point, that's where he meets us, each and every one. That's where he meets us,
in the
mind and the heart. Joe Biden ain't got a right to be there, and he really can't get there. There's only one entity in creation that belongs to. And in that first inalienable right, it's not just an inalienable right for us. It's God's inalienable right to have access.
He made our brain. He made our heart.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. It's an inalienable right for him to contact us and to be there.
Profound, Rick.
We have an inalienable right to him, and that's the way we think, because we're thinking bottom up. But when he wrote it, it's a two-way deal here.
Right.
Beautiful
you
thought.
always have a right to come to me, and I always have a right to come to you. And he put it right in that first phrase of the First Amendment.
That's profound.
Now, they say that the Democrats omitted God from the Pledge of Allegiance.
Rick, tell us what you experienced when you saw
Well,
that.
now, we talked before.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about their platform. They left God out of the platform.
On the Pledge of Allegiance, they've been trying since they got it in there. During the Eisenhower administration, I was in elementary when they put that in. There were people arguing and upset about it going in. And that was part of what we learned in school when they used to educate us and not indoctrinate us. We were doing current events, and we would read the articles, and we would read where Senator such and such didn't want it in there and said it was a violation of freedom of speech. It stayed in there. It's been in there now for 70 years almost. As far as the
Pledge of Allegiance?
No.
The platform.
The Democratic platform in 2012, there's a seed in the Democrat Party now. As over the years, it's become more left-leaning. It has become more and more
anti-God,
angry about it. There was always an anti-God element in the modern Democrat Party, born in the ACLU, born in the feminist movement, born in the gay movement, very much argumentative against anything Christian. In the 2012 election, during the convention, the platform committee decided on language that had to do with, I think, Israel, but they left God out of it. I think they left out the idea of giving lip service to Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. But I remember that when the platform came out, when President Obama, who was watching it, he wasn't at the convention yet. He came later to accept the nomination. When he heard that, he let them know, you get some reference to God in that platform.
And tell them why.
Whatever you say about Israel, it needs to be positive, because he knew he was going to get crucified on those two things. In the 2012, Christians were too strong. We've been battered and beat now, but we're coming back.
Almost 10 years
We're coming
later.
back.
We're coming back.
He said that. God's making a comeback.
Israel is still something that they needed to respect in 2012. So they had made two changes to the platform in public, and the public vote that night. And 3 occasions they had to have 3 votes, because the first 2 votes voted against God in the platform. You could hear it as a voice vote. And the biggest noise was always against God being in the platform. And when they raised a question concerning Israel, it was the same anti-biblical position again. And eventually, after 3 votes, they just went on and called it. You were listening, you could hear the biggest part of the crowd wanted God out. And they didn't want to recognize Jerusalem. They didn't want that. The leadership at the party called it and said, yeah, that third one is the one we want. Sealed it. The strange thing is, every time I found it on the internet since then,
they don't have that part.
You can't tell the difference in the sound. I don't know if they did it technologically, but watching it live is where you could actually hear the difference in the cheers.
And that's part of canceling culture in a sense, because it's canceling a historical event.
Here it says that the Democrat senators did not like Amy Coney Barrett because she was Catholic.
Feinstein
and Dick Durbin.
Feinstein went after and said,
the dogma lives loudly.
The dogma lives loudly. It sounded like she was from Star Wars or something. You remember when Darth Vader first had contact with his son in air combat? And he said, the force is large in this one.
I remember that. I haven't seen those in years.
The force is large in this. That's when he figured out, that's my boy.
Okay, the next one is Sean King. It says destroying all statues and art of Jesus in churches.
Well, tell him who's Sean King, who she is. She's a
Black Lives Matter leader.
Yeah. It's a guy.
Is it?
Sean King, yeah.
They call him Talcum X.
Talcum X.
Okay.
Yeah, there are people running around saying that he's not really black. I have a grandson, and he walked in here with me. You would assume he was just a friend of mine. He's 16 now. He's probably taller than me. He's a wrestler and a football player. You might look at that and say, he might be kidding. But to look at him, you never know. And Sean King, I'm looking at him. I see he has black features. His features on his face are African American. But keep in mind, throughout slavery, there was mixing with the wenches in the slave quarters. The masters always went out and got a little strange once in a while. Excuse me for using that terminology. They would go out and get a little strange once in a while. And they had babies with the wenches. In my mother's family, the master knew it was kind of like security for him on his property. If a lot of his property were also his children, because there would be a protection for him and his family in the big house. Mm-hmm. And they actually took care of their kids. My grandson, if you were to see him, you might look at him and assume Sean King isn't black.
But there's a lot of people in Black Lives Matter that are white and black.
Yeah, there are. For some reason, there's this issue like the woman that was head of the NAACP up in Seattle or Portland, Dolezal. I look at Dolezal, I see black features. Her eyes and her nose, there's black shape, especially her nose.
A lot of this has to go back to everybody instead of looking at someone's skin color. It doesn't matter what her skin color is.
Thank you. She was making it skin color.
What we want to ask you is they were wanting to burn down the churches and destroy anything Jesus with Christian art, but yet they called January 6th an insurrection. And
you're referring to St. John's Church in Washington?
Yeah, and even that. That's horrible.
That was an act of insurrection in June of last year when Black Lives Matter and Antifa and everybody that was rolling with them rioted on the grounds of the White House and attempted to get into the White House. There were 75 or 80 police officers injured.
No big deal about that.
They weren't interested in showing it. And they were claiming it was a mostly peaceful protest. But you got all of these cops injured. When they couldn't get in the White House, they turned their anger on St. John's Church, which is called the Church of the President.
It's a beautiful church.
And they went in there. They did some significant damage to it.
That shows right there with the media, the cancel and the culture. They want to make us look bad and make them look like everything's okay.
Nobody wanted to call that insurrection. That was an attack. An attack on the White House was an attack on the executive branch of our government, which is no less important than the attack on the Capitol building that occurred on January the 6th.
But it wasn't an attack. I was there. We were there.
Yeah, but y'all weren't in front.
I was right in front. I was about from here to there, and they were letting people in.
Okay.
It was not attack.
The police were letting them in.
The police were letting them in.
And also on the side, what they reported in the news are lies. And the only mayhem was inside.
I had heard that the police were letting people in.
Mayhem inside were dressed with Trump apparel, but they're the ones that they were supposed to be Antifa and Black Lives Matter. We were there. It was peaceful all day long.
Right.
Earlier in the morning at the Ellipse, in front of the Capitol, and at the White House, and all the way to there. Everything was peaceful. We didn't even know that was going on. It was just a few people caused a problem inside that weren't part of us.
Yeah. You all were doing one thing, and there were another group of people that were dedicated to another. They were climbing the walls. They were bashing in the windows.
No, I didn't see
I'm
any
not talking
window
about
bashing.
your folks. There was
a movie.
I know, but where I was in front.
I'm not saying you were doing what you were doing.
Well, but I did climb to get up there because it was so crowded.
Like over a hedge or something like that? You didn't climb up the wall.
Oh, no.
Okay. They were using rams.
Oh, no.
Instruments to bash in the windows.
But see, I never saw that, and I was right there.
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It was in another part of the building on the side.
It makes you wonder where, because we had people on side in our group that never saw that. So I'm beginning to wonder where all that was.
It was there. It was a setup.
That's the word I wanted
to use. It was a setup.
A setup.
But they want to call it an insurrection. I'll hold them to it. Just be consistent. Let's talk about what happened in June as an insurrection.
Well, think about all the Portland and Seattle.
I'm not going there. I'm keeping apples with apples. If just be consistent. I don't want to see nobody going to jail from January 6th if they're not going to go back and recharge some people from the first week in June of 2020.
There were some people that went in there that were not of our Trump people. They were of another group.
It doesn't matter. But I don't care if you're going to call them insurrectionists. Then let's be consistent.
Well, let's go on and talk about Clarence Thomas. I want to get his opinion about why Amazon took off his created equal Clarence Thomas in his own words. It's a popular public broadcasting documentary, and they just didn't allow it during the Black History Month.
Well, I think it's a book. Well, it might be a documentary.
It's also a book and a documentary, and they kept it from being available during the Black History. And this man is wonderful.
Clarence Thomas has been under attack ever since Ronald Reagan appointed him to the office when he was appointed, before he was even confirmed. Where'd y'all find a black man Ronald Reagan would appoint? Senator Danforth. He's been senator from Missouri. He had known, I think, at some point, Clarence Thomas had worked in a law firm. That was his law firm. And they had become friends, and Clarence ain't no joke. Whatever he does mentally, he's good at it.
Right.
He might not have been a great football player, I don't know. He knows how to work a courtroom. He knows how to win cases.
I've heard him talk about he's very giving of all these things. He's not even mad at people that used to get on him.
He was recommended by Senator Danforth to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan appointed him to the Office of Economic Opportunity. As soon as he got there, the civil rights community decided that because he was appointed by Ronald Reagan,
and the conservative,
they would give him no opportunity for anything. And they didn't know if he was conservative or not. All they knew was he was appointed by Ronald Reagan. When he got in there, he went to the Office of Economic Opportunity, and the office was a mess. There were cases that had never been acted upon that had been started, but were about to be adjudicated. He didn't have time to adjudicate the cases because statutorily there was a certain period of time that had to be accomplished, that had to be done in. And he was going to have to either convict some people of something that he didn't know was true or not, or he was going to have to throw out some charges of discrimination that he hadn't had a chance to investigate. That was one of the things that got him really in trouble with the civil rights community, was he was going to have to, and he let it be known he was going to have to do that. And I remember there was one case, I was living in Chicago. I actually drove over to look at the building where the company was, because I was living in Chicago at the time. And it was a company where there were only 2 white employees, and that was the man that owned the company and his son. In a Hispanic neighborhood where the building was, there were a lot of Hispanics that worked there and a lot of blacks that worked there. For some reason, there was a quota number of 8 women on staff there. That was like a hard number. And once somebody quit, someone came in to get the job, and they weren't hired. And they assumed that they weren't hired because of racism. So they went to Office of Economic Opportunity. And this was a very small business. I think they had 24 or 25 employees. The case hadn't been worked on. He didn't have time to pay justice, and he had to give them a fine over $120,000. He was actually on 60 Minutes talking about this, and he said it's not right. This company is not a company that discriminates. At some point, they actually did hire the 8th black woman.
So did they get their money back?
No. I don't know what happened to the company. But he was concerned that because it was such a small business, a fine of $120,000 would put everybody out of work. It would kill the company. All the 24, 25 employees would be out of work, and the man and his son would be out of business. Because he was by law, because of a hard number at a particular time, the 8th woman. When he got into the position, it had already passed all the flags, and it hadn't been done correctly. And he was being forced statutorily to hit them with this fine. And he came on 60 Minutes and said, this isn't right. That was the end of it for him as far as the civil rights community was concerned, because he was saying quotas can be an indicator of discrimination, but in and of themselves cannot be seen as proof, because here was a particular company that had the right number of black women.
It just happened to be one
and
left.
One left.
Yeah.
And once someone came to apply for the job, she didn't get it, so she went and put in a complaint. Now, the fact that later on another black woman was hired was irrelevant. None of that should have been enrolled. In the statutory process, it should have been taken into account.
That's really interesting. Hey.
Over 40 years ago.
it's gotten a lot worse, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Well, this kind of comes up with this Equality Act here, Dr. Simon and Rick, that what they've done, they said they're trying to pass it in the first 100 days with the quotas, the affirmative action.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not against affirmative action. People say, but that's quotas. Well, we used to have a quota of 0.
Right.
There was
I remember
always
you said
a
that
quota.
on Wednesday, and that's true. We had to do something.
You can call it whatever you want to. It comes down to numbers. Well, don't get too sensitive about it, because at one point we had 0.
Okay, what about this Equality Act?
This is horrendous. It could force schools and churches and hospitals to accept the government's beliefs and mandates about sexual orientation and gender identity. My grandson is in 1st grade now. Wonder if he gets a little boy that comes in, the next day he's a little girl, and he accidentally says, "Oh, there's Seth," and he's really now Beth. Kids are going to be reprimanded. You can't call him Seth now. Can you imagine in the mind of my little grandson, 7.5 years old, thinking, why can't I? He was a boy yesterday. That is, to me, disturbing on so many levels.
Well, there are other problems with this, too.
I raised 6 kids, and at no point I can't think of any procedure a young man could get until this. I can't think of any procedure a young man could get without parental consent.
Even your ears pierced. I couldn't get my ears pierced in high school unless I had my mom and dad.
Right. Not both of them, just one of them. A parent had to be involved in it. All of a sudden, abortion comes along, and even though there's no, what do they call it, equal protection under the law, because there's nothing that is comparable that could be done to a man, that boys could say, I demand the right to do this. There's nothing comes under that rubric for us. But young women, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whenever their menses starts, if they get pregnant and they don't want to have a baby, they get even in the state of Kentucky, you can show it might have to go to a court, to a judge.
But you can.
But they pick the court. They pick the judge. Planned Parenthood has always, if they don't have now, they used to have a lawyer on the phone in the Rolodex who would come in and do that paperwork and go to the right judge and get it done.
Get approval.
Yeah, to get approval. I remember about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a young lady. They didn't get to the right judge. And the judge was looking at it, and the young lady said she'd been abused by her father. And that was the reason she wanted to get an abortion. Well, the judge smelled the fish. What got the judge upset was that she said she had a younger sister. And the judge was concerned about this younger sister being abused. She wanted to know who the girl's father was. And because she was a minor, and all this is done to protect her privacy so she could get an abortion, her name was not on the case. It was just the attorney. It was in the media, and I can't remember how it worked out, but the media here in Louisville was very concerned about whether this girl's right to kill her baby was going to be upheld, because the judge was concerned about the little sister being in a house as a child with a man who had evidently, according to this sworn testimony, already incestuously raped his other daughter. By law, if you know something like that, you're supposed to report that. The judge was in a position where, y'all got to tell me something. And they were saying, no, we don't. And they were saying, yes, you do. And they were saying, no, we don't. And I don't remember, at this point, I don't remember if I ever even read. The powers that be, the editorial staff at the Courier Journal maybe decided, look, let's just quit talking about this. This don't look good for abortion. The Courier Journal has famously always supported abortion.
What are the other bills?
This one here, it goes further than that. It threatens religious ministries to hire people of the same shared faith to pursue a shared mission. Well, they're saying that they can allow them to come in and be forced to hire somebody that believes in abortion or is a transgender. That's like you coming into my home.
See, they learned a lesson. While Barack Obama was in office the last 3 or 4 years, remember he was sending down regulations to the education department that were requiring certain things to be done in order to protect transgender children.
That was really bad in the Navy, too.
Atherton High School was in the news here in Louisville. They were going to have bathrooms for transgender kids. Or the transgender kids would be able to go to the bathroom they deemed appropriate for them to go on.
They just need to have their own
so
bathroom.
They could have. And some people were saying, well, they need to have their own. It seemed that the school wanted to settle down on a transgender young man who seems...
They deem themselves a woman today.
Yeah. And so he was going to have access to the girls' locker room.
That's amazing.
And the girls' shower room. I'm going to give you a confession about myself. Not something we discussed earlier. I remember the kind of boy I was. I was horny. I wouldn't have thought about having to prove that I was a guy later.
Right.
If that meant I could get in the girls' locker room so I could see what they look like,
You would want to be a girl that day.
I would pick a day and I'd be a girl.
Can't you imagine boys wanting to do that?
I can imagine my mama and my daddy taking off the day and dragging me out to school, maybe whooping me going out the door. But you mean all I got to do is say I feel like a girl?
There are people that will do that.
I may have been more overly sexualized than other little boys. I didn't have no better sense if I was 12 years old.
Well, would you? Let's piggyback on that. Think of the people who are pedophilias. They want to get into little girls' rooms so that act like they're a girl, get in there.
The Obama administration, that was being promoted. Those regulations bled over into general regulations in the state of Massachusetts. And it was going after churches. And it was saying as long as a church in their worship services, they were free to preach their doctrine and act as they chose based on their worship services. But as soon as they offered services, which is ministry, which is what churches always do, is ministry to the community. As soon as you begin to do outreach or do work in the community, then you were going to have to go by these other regulations. So even though you were allowed to preach your doctrine and run things, your preaching staff and your teaching staff, you could have that. But as soon as you operated one ministry that did outreach that would bring somebody in that was not a member of your church, immediately you were going to be subject to all of these regulations. What saved us? Donald Trump got elected.
What you talked about earlier, when God gave us our brain and our heart.
Right.
Well, he did. He gave us our mind to think. They are trying to make us think like them. We have an inalienable right to be able to think.
And they're trying to take over God's territory.
Exactly.
They're trying to take God's place.
HR 1 is 800 pages, includes no telling what.
It has everything imaginable. I want to look at it, but who wants to read 800 pages? Here are just a few things. We have taxpayers to fund candidates. If a candidate just gets a $200 donation, he will get 6 times that from the government check. Saying he will get $1,200. Gets a $1,000 donation, he will get $6,000. Almost kind of like welfare for candidates. If they can't raise the money, they do have to sign something that they can't raise a certain amount.
There's a reason why money is considered to be speech when it comes to politics. It's because it takes money to get your message. If your messages are strong enough to garner support, as much as you may be serious about it, either you need to learn how to sell your sizzle a little better, or you need to maybe look and see, well, maybe my point of view ain't right. Because everybody that's listening,
they ain't donating.
They bring me no money.
And that's scary to me. And also, the main thing I think I worry about this bill is that destroy state-level voter verification efforts, which this does. The voters no longer will ever have to show an ID, and this will go not by state.
Oh, my God.
It will undo the state laws.
All Democrat laws, right?
You mean literally I could vote
you can go anywhere.
I could go vote in every precinct because I never have to prove who I was.
Yeah.
I could just get up.
Go to each precinct.
I could just get up and go vote.
Again and again.
Cindy, one of the things is that they wanted to do both automatic voter registration and same-day voter registration. If you combine the two, you could, if you wanted to, go in the morning, say, to vote in a location, and then skip across the river and go vote in the other place and claim that you live in a different address, register and vote.
There are states out west where that was the case. And I think that's how Acorn got in trouble. They got caught doing stuff like that.
They're close
taking people across the border, voting them in one state and then taking them somewhere, same-day registration, and voting them somewhere else.
What that does is that totally makes our whole system just like what happened last time. You don't have to prove who you say you are to even register. And if they do, it becomes a criminal act. If you ask someone to prove who they are, they don't have to.
You just broken the law.
So it's making it so easy.
We wanted Rick to say something about what you're starting, and
I've been asked to start something.
It's in the infancy.
I'll back it up. I'll roll with them, but I'm having some problems. with my legs.
Be their mentor.
I'll be available for that.
Okay, let's thank Rick Howland
Thank you, Rick.
for doing such a great job and being on the program.
I'm trying.
And we appreciate Cindy.
Thank y'all for being my friends for so many years.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rick.
we love you. Cindy Marlow for being on the program, and tune in again next week for the rest of the news.